Hi, my name is Moises Rodriguez, and I'm recording this video for the purpose of talking about test-taking strategies for economic students. In particular, this video is going to be based on a sample final exam for microeconomics. Even though this is microeconomics, I encourage all economic students to use the tips that I'm going to talk about in this video. I will follow up this video with another video that will address a sample test for macroeconomics. But let's go ahead and get started on this for now. There are three basic steps that I want to talk about as far as test-taking strategies. Number one, and perhaps the most important, is try to stay cool under fire. Now, that's certainly easier said than done. One of the things that we feel, and all of us, myself included, because I'm subject to testing as all of us are, and will probably be subject to testing the rest of our careers, regardless of what we've been able to accomplish in the past. Now, whenever we start an exam, our adrenaline goes up. We get nervous. We might panic. We feel that we're not going to have enough time to finish all the questions. We also may encounter frustration. We may feel that the right answer isn't within the selectable options, that none of the questions really fit, that all the questions are so finely worded that it's so hard to distinguish one from the other. Okay. Some of the tips that I'm about to talk about will require you to believe in a particular system, but they will also help you with this frustration. But it will require practice. Test-taking strategies is a learned tool that you can get better and better at. Okay, so besides staying cool, which is obviously easier said than done, let's talk about the remaining two. And that is, be open to the counterintuitive. Now, what is the counterintuitive? In this particular case, it's trying to change the way you approach an exam by learning to look for the answers that are obviously wrong, so you can try to eliminate at least two of the potential answers in the multiple choice question. And number two, being open to the possibility that there's other questions within the exam that will actually help you answer a question that you're struggling with. And this will take some practice, because intuitively we're all wanting to jump at the first question that looks good, and we enter an exam saying it's hard enough to finish an exam the traditional approach that I've been using, much less to take these additional steps that you're suggesting. But believe me, I have had students try this technique and it has worked. So I urge all of you to try to use this. You're going to find that there is enough time to take this approach. Now, the third one is learning and practicing in each occasion to identify the key word in the question. The key word is one word. If you can isolate one word in the entire question, that will help you differentiate the answers, the four answers, and will help you eliminate at least two, hopefully, of the potential answers, so you can finally get to the right answer. Now, I really encourage all people, especially business students, to utilize this technique, because the truth is that not only in our business and professional lives is it important to identify keywords in every sentence, it's important in our personal life, because we sign lease agreements, mortgage agreements, cell phone agreements, all types of negotiations whereby one word can change the entire meaning. And therefore, I think it's highly important that you start practicing that technique. Okay, having said all three, let's go and get started and try to apply these three techniques or tips, steps, if you want to call them that. So what I have done is I have selected a final that has 30 questions. It's based on microeconomics, okay? And I can certainly make this practice final available to anyone that requested. But the first question is, macroeconomics is, and so the first question to all of you is, what's the key word here? It's really complicated. It's actually is. Just kidding. Okay, if we go with the concept that the key word is macroeconomics, let's try to see what answers we can eliminate. Now, what does macroeconomics mean? Well, to me, it means that we're taking a big picture approach. They call it the bottom down versus the bottom up. And so let's take a look at some of the potential answers that we can eliminate. Here are the choices. The study of individual choice and how that choice is influenced by economic forces. Well, does that look like a top-bottom approach or a bottom-up? It appears that this is more a bottom-up. So this is more on microeconomics. And I think we can eliminate that one. The second answer, B, is the study of pricing policies of firms and the purchasing decisions of households. Well, the question is, again, is this a bottom-up or a top-bottom approach? And because we're looking at firms and households, then this is really a bottom-up. Again, we can eliminate this because our keyword is macroeconomics and we're looking for a top-bottom approach. The next one is the study of aggregate economic relationships. With the word aggregate, that seems to be like a big picture approach. So let's not eliminate that just yet. Let's go on to D, an analysis of economic reality that proceeds from the parts to the whole. That certainly seems to me a bottom up. So I think we can eliminate that one. And so having used this one key word, where we've actually been able to eliminate 3 of the answers, thus confirming that C is the answer. Let's go to the next one. The invisible hand theorem comes from. So if we can all agree that the key word is invisible. If so, then let's go, what does invisible hand mean? Well, to me it means a free market, that everything as a whole will work itself out if the government does not intervene. What does that imply? Well, to me it implies a big picture approach or macroeconomics. And let's take a look at the answers. The first one is microeconomics. So I think we can eliminate that one. B is macroeconomics, but let's not eliminate that one just yet, or let's not jump to that answer. It looks good, but let's stick to the approach of eliminating all the ones that we can. C and D are sociology and political science. Has nothing to do with the question. Thus, again, we have eliminated 3 of the potential answers and we go back to B, macroeconomics. Question number 3. The law of demand states that the quantity demanded of a good inversely related to the price of that good. Therefore, as the price of the good goes. Okay, what's the key word here? Well, to me, it's demand. When we talk about demand, we're talking about consumers. And that leads us to the law of demand that indicates there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity. Thus, the higher the price, the lower the demand. The lower the price, the higher the demand. So, given all that, let's now look at the answers, and instead of trying to guess the correct one, let's try to eliminate the ones that are wrong. So, the first one is that as the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes up. Now, does that make sense? That's certainly not an inverse relationship. So I think we can eliminate that one. The second one says the price of a good goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. Now that's certainly an inverse relationship. So let's not eliminate that one, but let's go to the others. As the price goes down, the quantity demanded goes down. Well, C does not represent an inverse relationship, so therefore I think we can eliminate that. Let's go to D. As the price goes down, the quantity demanded stays the same. Again, that one does not reflect an inverse relationship. So we go back to B, and that is the correct answer, but we get additional assurance because we have eliminated 3 of the answers. Now, let's go to question 4. Which of the following situations best demonstrates the law of demand? Again, an inverse relationship between price and quantity that's being determined by the consumer. Answer A, moviegoers react to an increase in price of a ticket by seeing fewer movies per year. Now, is that an inverse relationship between price and quantity? Well, yes. So let's not eliminate that one, but let's keep going, looking to eliminate. B, moviegoers see fewer movies per year due to the overall decrease in the quantity of newly released movies. Now, is that really an inverse relationship? Because what you got is fewer movies that are being seen because there's fewer quality movies. So that's not a direct inverse relationship. So I think we can eliminate that one. C, a drought causes a decrease in the availability of pumpkins, resulting in fewer jack-o'-lanterns displayed in Halloween. Now this is a tough one because certainly there's a decrease in pumpkins, and you could say that because there was less pumpkins, the price of pumpkins went up, resulting in fewer jack-o'-lanterns being displayed because fewer people wanted to pay the higher price for jack-o'-lanterns. But let's keep this one in. It's possible that this could be correct, but there's a very indirect inverse relationship here. All right, so let's go to D. An increase in the number of people writing economic textbooks results in a decrease in average textbook prices. Well, this is really more a thing of supply here. There's more people writing books, okay? And so therefore, this is sort of like a function that there's a more of a supply, therefore the prices will go down. So it seems like that is not really directly on the law of demand. So we're left with A and C. And the question is, can both questions be correct? Well, while C is not necessarily incorrect, the question is, which is the best answer? And in this case, I think it's clearly A. So let's move on to question 5. If quantity demanded does not change when prices change, the demand is, okay, so what's the key word here? And to me, it's change. Because in this case, there's no change. And so what situation do we have when there's no change? Despite the fact that there's been a change in price or change in environment. Well, when there's no change or no response to a change in the environment, we typically associate that with inelasticity. So let's take a look at some of the answers here. A is elastic. Well, that's certainly counter to what we're looking for, so we can eliminate that one. B is inelastic. Well, while that may be true, let's try to keep eliminating some other answers and being open to the possibility that there may be a better answer. C says has unit elasticity. Well, back to the elasticity issue, I think we can eliminate that because what we're looking for is inelasticity. And D is perfectly inelastic. The question here is, which is the better answer between B and D? And when the fact is that there was absolutely no change, so we have something that's perfectly inelastic. And again, the change or the absence of any change led us to the answer that it's perfectly inelastic. So now let's go on to question 6. High gasoline prices hit commuters who live far from their jobs in areas with little public transportation, with few alternatives. They have to bear the higher cost. Based on this information, how would you characterize demand for gasoline by these commuters? And it's a pretty long statement. And the question is, what's the key word? Well, to me, the key word is alternatives. And in this case, there's few alternatives. Now, what happens when there's few alternatives? Well, first of all, there's few substitutes. What does this lead to? It typically leads to a high degree of inelasticity. So, when we have few choices, the other thing is that we may put a high value on this product because there is no substitute. We also may look at this as a luxury good. Having said all that, let's take a look at the potential answers. A, gasoline is a luxury good. Well, possibly. Let's go on. Let's try to eliminate some answers here. B, gasoline is an inferior good. Well, that certainly runs contrary to what we're talking about here. So I think we can eliminate B. C, demand for gasoline is elastic. Well, again, in this particular situation, that's certainly running contrary to what we're getting to here. And so I think we can eliminate C. D, demand for gasoline is inelastic. And that's certainly what we're looking for. So now let's step back and take a look at the remaining answers that have not been eliminated, which is A and D. And the question is, which is the better answer? That gasoline is a luxury good or that gasoline is inelastic? And from an economic standpoint, I think the better answer is D. Demand for gasoline is inelastic. Because again, we're looking for ultimate behavior or ultimate results. All right, let's move on to question 7. Mr. Woodward has found it necessary to hire more workers. However, he has observed that the doubling of the number of workers has less than doubled his output. What is the likely explanation? And again, another long question. The question here is, what's the key word? And to me, it's output. You're looking at a relationship of output to input. And if we want to keep going with this concept from an economic standpoint, you're looking for efficiency, you're looking for productivity. And one of the things that we know is that we can start out pretty inefficiently. We can gain more efficiency as we go. We can reach economies of scale, and then we reach diseconomies of scale. But one thing, the other thing that we do know is that it's going to be hard to get the same amount of output from the second worker as compared to what the first worker is producing. So now let's look at, having said all that, let's look at the answers. The A is the law of diminishing marginal utility. Well, I look at the word utility, and the word utility means enjoyment to me. And this person is looking for productivity. So I think we can eliminate that answer. B, the law of diminishing marginal productivity. Well, I am swayed, I have to tell you. And I think that if I were taking a test, I have the temptation of just going with this answer right now. But let's try to keep on with this process. Let's look at C, the law of supply. Does this have anything to do with what we're really focused on, productivity? No. I think we can eliminate that one. D, the law of demand. Again, does this have anything to do directly with productivity? And here the answer is no. So now, having eliminated all three, we can go back to the question that we thought, or the answer that we thought was correct, and have more confirmation that the correct answer is B. Question number 8, marginal product eventually. Okay, so marginal product. Again, what is the key word here? To me, it's product or production. Again, if we, in economic terms, we're always looking for marginal changes. So if we can use the information that we used in the last example, that at first we start with inefficiencies, we gain efficiencies, and if we go beyond a certain capacity, we gain inefficiencies. Again, let's go and take a look at the answers here. A says declines because some inputs are fixed. Now, the question is, we want to look at everything with only one variable. So the question is that true? Are inputs fixed? Well, the truth is that if we're going to continue production, we're going to have to increase the amount of input. So I think that we can eliminate that answer. Increases because some inputs are fixed. Now, does that make sense? Again, if inputs are fixed, if all inputs are fixed, how can productivity increase? C, declines because some inputs are variable. Well, the question is, here we're looking at total production. And the question is, does it make sense that if you have variable inputs and you're actually putting more of a input in, that your overall production is going to decrease? Now, again, if we return back to the question, marginal product eventually, so we can read in marginal production, and we can say that over time the marginal production is going to decline because we do reach a point of efficiency, and then eventually we get to a point of inefficiency. All right? And so let's just say, let's leave that one in. And Then we go to answer D, increases because some inputs are variable. Well, that doesn't look like necessarily a bad answer, okay? And quite honestly, having read all four, the question is, how many have we eliminated so far? Well, let's go and take a look at all the questions here and look at marginal productivity, okay? And what we do know is that eventually we'll gain efficiency and then we'll get into inefficiency. So the question is, which ones can we truly eliminate and which one is going to be left over? This is a rather difficult question, all right? So let me start with inverse order again. In this case, increases because some inputs are variable. Well, are we following a pattern that we gain efficiencies and then reach inefficiencies? Okay, so having read more into this question, we're now looking for inefficiencies, all right? And so sometimes we have to reevaluate a question as we go. And so if we're looking for the point where we get into inefficiencies, we can actually now look at the questions that talk about increasing production versus decreasing. And if we look at it that way, we can eliminate B and D, all right? Because that's going against what we're looking for. And what we're left with is A and C. Declines because some inputs are fixed, and declines because some inputs are variable. And the question here is, which one is the best answer? I think this question being a pretty tough one, all right, it's going to be tough to find the best answer. But in this particular case, the question is, is it really going to be a matter of the fact that production is going to decline because inputs are variable? Well, when they're variable, you typically increase the amount of input. So I think by default, we're left with A, that productivity declines because some inputs are fixed, albeit this is a tough question. And sometimes we have to really belabor between the remaining two questions that are left. Okay, let's go on to 9. Suppose you operate a factory that produces gadgets. Your current output is 1,000 gadgets. If your fixed cost is 10,000 and your total cost is 50,000, then, so let's evaluate where we are. Our total cost is 50,000. We're producing 1,000 gadgets, and our fixed cost is 10,000. So it seems like our variable cost is 40,000. And if we divide that by the number of gadgets, our per unit variable cost is $40. So let's take a look. We've got $40 per unit of variable cost and 10,000 of fixed cost. Let's take a look at the answers. The average total cost of production is $500. Well, if we took $500 times 1,000, we would get a total cost of 500,000. Yet our total cost is 50,000. Okay, so I think by virtue of doing some simple math, we can eliminate that one. B is average variable cost of production is 40, which is consistent with what we analyzed before starting to look at the answers. So that one looks good, but let's try to keep with the process and try to eliminate some more. Average variable cost of production is 50. We already said it was 40. So I think we can eliminate that one. And the last one is marginal cost of production is 40,000. Well, that really, marginal cost of production would indicate that's the cost for one additional unit. And so that hardly seems correct. So we can go back to B, having eliminated all three of the other answers. Let's go on to 10. The average variable cost comes from a mirror image of. All right, so what's the key word here? I think it's variable. What we can say about variable cost is that as quantity increases, the total cost increases. If we took labor hours, the more hours of labor, the higher the total cost. So therefore, we can see a relationship between price and total cost and quantity, whereby total cost would be increasing relative to the quantity. And so I think that if we graphed it out between total cost and quantity, we would have an upward sloping curve. And that would resemble a supply curve. So now let's take that information and take a look at the answers. A total product curve. Well, the question here is, if the total product curve basically was graphed out between total cost and quantity, then that might be a right answer. So let's not eliminate that. Marginal product curve. Well, that's just going to be a reflection of marginal cost. And that's going to show you inefficiencies, then efficiencies, then inefficiencies. So that's probably not going to be a relationship of exactly what we're looking for. So I think the question here is, can we eliminate B? And I think the answer is yes. Now, C is average product curve. And that's not real clear. What does average product curve mean? That's not even average product cost. So I think this is a trick answer that we can eliminate. Or is it? Okay. I mean, is it average product cost curve, or what are they trying to say? So even though I was tempted to eliminate that, let's keep going and let's keep it as a possible answer. And let's go on to D, marginal cost curve. Well, when we deal with marginal, again, that's going to leave us into a situation where we start inefficient, we get to efficient, then inefficient, meaning that marginal cost starts out high, starts going down, and goes back up. So it's a curvature approach. Upon reflection, I think the word marginal allows us to eliminate B and D. And going back to the question, perhaps we can look at what is the best keyword. Is it average or variable? And it's very tough. But if we start it with variable, we know that the total cost increases as quantity. And so that allows us to establish an upward sloping curve. Then when we look at it further, the concept of average, allows us to eliminate both questions that start out with marginal. And so we're left with questions A and C, total product curve and average product curve. And so the question is, which one is the best answer? And while both of them are probably reflective of an upward sloping curve, I think C, because it has the word average, is the best answer. Now let's go on to question 11. Suppose wages and Suppose wages and employment decrease. These changes were most likely caused by, and we're given 4 answers. So the question is, what's the key word? And to me, it's decrease, because both wages and employment decrease. And so if we look for a relationship where both wages and employment decrease, all right, the question is, what is that a function of? And let's just think about this a little bit. If we had wages just decreasing, perhaps that was a result of more workers available. And so, but that doesn't really explain both the situation of wages and employment decreasing. So let's take a look at the answers. A decline in immigration, meaning that there's less people coming in to take jobs. Well, that kind of goes contrary, because if there's less people taking jobs, you would think there would be more jobs available for the people here, and that prices would go up, the wages would go up. So that certainly runs contrary. Increase in immigration, meaning that people leaving the country. And with fewer workers available, then that certainly opens up the concept that there's less workers available. But then if there's less workers available, then you would think that wages would increase. So that runs contrary. And I think so far we've been able to eliminate A and B. Let's go to C. Increase in the working age population. Well, even though they're older, they're still working. So that really that would increase the amount of workers. Potentially that could decrease wages. But then we're also dealing with both a decrease in wages and employment. And these people are already working. They're not taking new jobs. They already have jobs because they're working. And the last one is decline in business activity in the economy. And so while C is not necessarily a wrong answer, I think the best answer is D. Okay, so let's move on to question 12. The incentive effect refers to how much a person will change his or her. Now, when we talk about incentive effect, okay, in this case, that really is near and dear to me, because that reminds me of the supply, the law of supply, because that's an incentive-based concept. And so I would go with the key word incentive, and also focused on the law of supply. So let's talk about that. Okay, the law of supply for a worker is the higher that you're willing to pay per hour, the more they're willing to work. So let's compare that to the answers provided. Okay, hours worked in responses to a change in wage rate. Well, that's pretty close to what I would expect, so let's not eliminate that. Wage rate in response to a change in productivity. Well, we're looking for a relationship between wage rate and number of hours, so that's not really related to productivity, so I think we can eliminate B. C, quantity demanded of a tax good in response to a change in tax rate. Well, here we're talking about a person. Okay, now this is perhaps related to, the incentive effect, and tax is certainly a disincentive, but I think that in this case, we need to focus on wages and the number of hours worked. And so, having said that, I think we can eliminate C as well. D, wage rate in response to a change in the tax rate in earnings. And this is a tough one because we are talking about wage rate and how many hours they're willing to work. And tax, a change in tax rate certainly is potentially a disincentive or an incentive depending on which way we're going with the tax rate. So quite honestly, A and D are very close. And the question is, which is the best answer? And I think the most directly related answer is the hours worked in response to a change in the wage rate, because that's a more direct answer. Because D is wage rate in response to a change in a tax rate. And so that's a more indirect relationship. Okay, let's move on to question 13. Rachel left her job as a graphics artist where she earned $42,000 per year to open up her own graphic arts firm. Her explicit costs for the new business include, what's the key word? And to me, it's explicit, and you'll find in the sample final it's in bold, makes it pretty easy for us. What's explicit? Well, to me, explicit are the obvious costs. And so how could we use explicit to eliminate some of the answers? It seems to me that we go with the opposite and we look for answers that include implicit costs. In economic terms, what are implicit costs? And to me, the most obvious one is opportunity costs. So let's take a look at what answers represent opportunity cost or implicit costs. Only the expenses incurred by the office space, equipment, and supplies. Well, those are certainly explicit costs. B, only her foregone salary of $42,000. That's an implicit cost, and I think we can eliminate B. C, both the expenses incurred for the office space, equipment, and supplies, and her foregone salary. Well, if any answer is wrong, it's all wrong, and it includes some implicit costs, so therefore C is wrong. D, neither the expenses incurred for office space, equipment, and supplies or the foregone salary. Well, again, they're eliminating the explicit costs is what they're asking for in the answer. And so therefore, I think we can eliminate that one. And so we're left with A. Okay, purely the explicit costs. 14, if your company's cell phone bill is either $40 when it's 300 minutes per month or $80 when you use the phone between 300 and 400 minutes per month, the marginal cost of the 301st minute is. Okay, so what's the key word here? And I think the key word is marginal, because there's 1 minute here, a marginal minute, that will take your total bill from 40 to 80. And that's the 301st minute. And so the question here is the marginal cost of the 301st minute is. Well, that 301st minute is taking us from a total bill of 40 to 80, a difference of 40. So let's try to eliminate some of the answers based on that. The marginal A says 13 cents, obviously wrong. B is 27 cents, obviously wrong. C is $40. We'd want to jump at that, but let's go on to D. The answer is $80, and yet they're only looking at the marginal cost, meaning that the difference from 40 to 80. So I think we can eliminate D and go back to C and feel more comfortable that C is the correct answer. Question 15. A market structure in which one firm makes up the entire market is, to me, the key word is one. There's only one player. What does that infer? A monopoly. So let's take a look at the answers. A is a monopoly, and obviously we'd want to jump at that one. But let's go on. B, perfect competition. Well, that's hardly likely with one player. C, an oligopoly means you need at least two players, and the key word is one. D, monopolistic competition, and in a situation where we have several players, and yet here the key word is one. So having used the keyword of one allows us to eliminate three answers and return to the one that we originally wanted to select. A. All right. Question 16. There are many restaurants in Raleigh, North Carolina, each one differing food or offering differing food each one offering food and service that differ from those from its competition. There is also the free entry of sellers into the market, and each seller serves a small fraction of the total meals served each day. The restaurant industry in Raleigh is best categorized as. So we've got a very long question here. The question is, what's the key word? To me, the key word is differ. The question has already told us there are many players. So we don't have a monopoly. We don't have an oligopoly. And so what we're left with is, as potential answers in terms of the four different types of business organizations, are purely competitive and monopolistic competition. We do have many players here because they all serve a small portion of the total meals served on a per day basis by all restaurants in the city. But they all differ in the type of food that they offer. So let's take a look at the answers. An oligopoly, well, that's eliminated because there's a lot of players. Monopolistic competitive, well, we certainly want to jump at that one. A pure monopoly, well, we know that's not true. And perfectly competitive. The key word allows us to differ from perfect competition and monopolistic competition because we have a lot of players, but the key word differ allows us to eliminate three answers and allows us to come back to one. Okay, number 17. The differences between a monopolist and a monopolistic competitor is that. Okay, so what's the key word here? To me, it's either, well, I think it's monopolist. What does that imply? Well, a monopoly, one player. And what can we say when we have a monopoly? Well, they can usually charge higher prices. A monopolistic competitor has a niche market and their prices are high, but in the long run, because they have to spend more money on advertising, building goodwill, and product differentiation, in the long run, their net profit is very much equal to someone in a highly competitive market because they have to spend this additional money. They have higher margins, higher markup, but at the end, their cost structure is very similar to someone in a highly competitive market. So having said that, we can compare that to monopoly that actually can have higher margins because they have no competition. So let's look at the potential answers. A monopolistic equates marginal revenue and marginal cost. Well, having said what we said, we got a situation where the question arises, is this person really going to be selling at a place where their marginal cost equals their marginal revenue? Unlikely. B, the average total cost curve of a monopolistic competitor is tangent to the demand curve in the long run equilibrium, but the average total cost of a monopolistic can be in a position below the price of a long run equilibrium. Well, isn't that pretty consistent with the relationship here? That in the long run, someone in a niche market is going to have pretty much the same profitability as someone in a highly competitive market, but that's different for someone in a monopoly. So let's not eliminate that one. C, the average total cost curve of a monopolist is tangent to a demand curve in the long run, but the average total cost curve of a monopolistic competitor can be in a position below the price in a long run equilibrium. If we focus on the latter part of this answer, okay, it would seem to imply that the monopolistic competitor is in the long run better off. And we just said that in long run, they're pretty much in the same boat as someone in a highly competitive market. So I think we can eliminate that one. Let's go to D. The average total cost curve of monopolist is tangent to the demand curve in long run equilibrium, but the average total cost curve of a monopolistic competitor can be in a position above the price. Well, in long run, that would imply that someone in a niche market is going to be incurring a cost curve above what they can sell for. Very unlikely. So I think we're back to B. And having focused on the keyword of monopolist and all that it implies allows us to eliminate 3 of the answers. So let's go on to 18. If a perfectly competitive firm finds that the price is less than the average variable cost, it should. Okay, so we have a perfectly competitive firm, and the price is less than the average variable cost. Well, this is a tough one to find the key word, but I think the key word is less. And in this case, the sales price is less than even your variable cost. What does that mean? Well, it means that you're not even covering your variable costs, much less your fixed costs. It also means that the more output that you generate, the more loss you're going to incur. In other words, you're going to incur a loss at every stage of production. And that loss will increase with every unit that you increase production with. So let's take a look at some of the answers. A, not adjust output if marginal cost equals price. Well, if you got the situation, not doing anything probably doesn't sound like the right answer. B, shut down immediately. Well, to me that certainly sounds like the right answer, but let's go on to C and D. Increase output. Okay, well, that certainly is going against the grain because that's going to increase losses with every unit that's the more output that there is. Decrease output until price equals marginal cost. Well, price is never going to equal marginal cost because our contribution margin is negative. So having eliminated 3 answers, we're back to what sounded like the right answer to start. B, shut down immediately. Question number 19. A perfectly competitive firm facing price of $10 decides to produce 100 widgets. If its marginal cost of producing the last widget is $12 and it seeks to maximize profit, the firm should. Okay, now what's the key word? To me, it's marginal. Okay, because we're talking about productivity. Okay, and so that infers marginal cost. Now, it also tells us that our marginal cost is currently $12. If we look at the relationship of production costs, we know that we start inefficient, we reach a point of efficiency, then we go beyond that point of efficiency and reach a point of inefficiency. Everything here leads us to believe that they are now at a point of inefficiency, that they have gone beyond the point of their most efficient level of production. So let's take a look at some of the answers here. A, produce more widgets. Well, that I think we can eliminate. Produce fewer widgets. Well, that might be a good answer. Continue producing 100 widgets. Well, if our current marginal cost is $12, that certainly sounds like not the right answer because we can only realize a price of 10. And the last one is shut down. Well, that sounds like a pretty rapid response when in fact we might produce fewer widgets and get to a more efficient production level. So I think in this case, the best answer is B. 20. If a firm has a monopoly over the sale of photographic paper and seeks to maximize profit, okay, what's the key word? Again, I think it's monopoly. And here, we want to maximize profits. So the question is, which is the best answer? Adjust the price of the product until demand becomes perfectly inelastic. Well, when we have a monopoly, we already have inelasticity. And so the question is this a wrong answer? Not necessarily. We'll set the price for the product equal to the marginal cost of production. Well, hardly, because monopolies usually run and sell above their production costs. So B would hardly be the answer. I think we can eliminate that one. We'll set the price of the product equal to average total cost. Again, that's not really going to help maximize profits because a monopoly can sell above its cost level. We'll set the price of the product to its marginal revenue equal to its marginal cost. Well, the truth is that we did not eliminate A, but from an economic standpoint, in order to maximize profit, we do want to produce output up until our marginal revenue equals our marginal cost to squeeze the last cent we can. So by default, D is the best answer. 21, the best example of a positive externality is, well, the key word I think is positive. Okay, let's look at, again, this is an externality, something outside of our control, or economics, or something that we have direct control over. The answers are roller coaster rides. Is that a positive externality? Well, I don't know. Let's not rule that out. B, pollution. Well, that's hardly a positive externality. Alcoholic beverages is C. Is that really a positive externality? That's considered a vice. Some would argue that that could be a positive, but I think we can rule that out because we're looking for something that the general population is looking as positive. So let's go to D, education. And while some people may consider roller coaster rides a positive externality, I think generally speaking, when we're looking for economic growth and something positive to create jobs, the best answer is education. 22, the cost of running an electrical utility includes cost of fuel, labor, and capital. In addition, there are sometimes costs associated with pollution from the utility, such as increased healthcare, costs for people living near the utility. To an economist, the costs associated with the pollution resulting from additional electricity are, okay, this is a tough one, okay? What are you going to use for your keyword? To me, you could use pollution or you could use economist. I would side with economist because you need to get into the economist way of thinking. And what is the economist view of thinking? Well, primarily marginal profit orientation, and more so profit orientation. And so the question is, what's the economist going to think about the pollution? Well, they don't look to the I guess consequences of profit making like pollution, and so they don't really pay a whole lot of attention to that, and they don't really get into who should cover that. I would think that if a business can get away with polluting without being fined, then the economist is not really going to get into that argument. So let's look at the answers. Marginal private costs. Is the economist going to look into that the business should cover all the costs associated with pollution? Probably not. Marginal social cost. Is the economist going to look into that all of society should pay for pollution? Probably not. The difference between marginal social costs and marginal private costs. Well, the truth is that economists really look at the concept of marginal. And so the economist is likely to look at and think that this is an issue between the private sector and the public sector. Okay? And so let's not rule that out. Let's go to D. The sum of marginal social costs and marginal private costs. So we're really faced with a question of between C and D. And so the question is, which is the best answer? The sum of or the difference? And because economists always look at the margin, which is the incremental, I think that the best answer is C, the difference. Because they're evaluating the cost of the business picking up the cost versus the society picking up the cost. 23. When Turner Network producer and owner of movies bought a local cable company, it was an example of. Okay, now, in this particular case, what's the key word? Well, to me, it's movies, because that's the product. And the question is, how does movies come into play between Turner Network and a local cable company? Well, both are providing movies. Okay, and so the question is, what kind of transaction here? Because what we have is that Turner bought the local cable company. What kind of transaction do we have here? And so let's take a look at the answers here. Horizontal merger. Well, the truth is that if Turner produces the movies and the cable company shows them, that doesn't look like a horizontal merger. I think we can eliminate that one. Vertical merger. Well, a vertical merger talks about a merger of two companies that have a relationship downward. And in this case, Turner is producing the movies, the cable company is showing them. That would seem to be the right answer. Let's look at C and D. C, conglomerate merger. Well, conglomerate is a merger of two dissimilar companies that have very little to no relationship with one another. So therefore, I think we can eliminate that one. D, diagonal merger. I don't even know what that is. I think that's just a trick answer. So I think having eliminated 3 answers, we're back to B, vertical merger. Question 24. Kmart acquires Sears so both companies could better compete with Walmart. The acquisition is an example of. And so here, what's the key word? And I think the key word is compete. They're trying to create a synergy, meaning that they're bringing 2 companies that operate and produce or provide similar goods and services to compete with Walmart. And so here are the answers. Vertical. Well, unlike the previous question, one does not produce and the other one provide. And so therefore, that doesn't seem likely. Conglomerate merger is B, and that means dissimilar, but yet here we're trying to create a synergy, and therefore that can be eliminated. C, horizontal. That certainly seems like the right answer, but let's take a look at D, hostile takeover. If this merger was put together to compete, it certainly doesn't seem like hostile. So I think we've eliminated 3 of the answers, and we're back to horizontal merger, which is C. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Sorry this is taking so long. 25. When government imposes a per unit tax on a product, the net price producers receive for the product after all taxes typically. Now, what's the key word here? To me, it's receive. They're on the receiving end. Okay. And so if there's a tax on this, all right, and we're looking at the amount that the producer receives. So the question is this going to be something that results in the producer receiving more or less? And because there's a tax, it would seem to me, and we use the keyword receive, I think we can eliminate any answer that says increase. And so A and B talk about increase, and I think we can eliminate those answers. And so D is decreases by the amount of per unit tax, and D is decreases by less than the amount of the per unit tax. Now, I'll be honest with you. In this particular case, at this point, not having read all the other answers, I would not know the answer to this because I don't really know where they're going with this. And what I mean by that is we don't really know if they're in a competitive situation where they can recover the entire tax or not. And this is a perfect example of a question that is best left alone, where you keep on going to see if there's an answer afterwards that helps us come back to answer this question. So let's go on to 26. In 1997, the federal government reinstated a 10% excise tax on airline tickets. The industry tried to pass on the full 10% ticket tax to customers, but was only able to boost the price per plane ticket by 4%. From this, you can conclude that. And here, this becomes even more difficult to identify the keyword. But how about if we use the keyword pass? Because in this case, we're only able to pass on 4% of the 10% tax. Okay, so let's take a look at what would that imply if we're only able to pass on a part of that additional cost. It means that we're in a very competitive environment, a very elastic consumer, okay, that where we need to absorb some of the additional cost ourselves. So let's take a look at some of the answers. Demand for airline tickets is perfectly inelastic. Well, we just said we're looking for consumers that are elastic, highly elastic. So we can eliminate A. Supply if of airline tickets is perfectly inelastic. Here, we're actually looking for an answer that involves where demand is elastic. So I think that in this particular case, while some of the statement in this B may be true, that's not really the kind of answer we're looking for, and we can eliminate B. C, demand for airline tickets is price elastic. Well, I think that's true, okay? But the question is that really the best answer, okay? It certainly looks that way, but let's just take a look at D. Supply elasticity of airline tickets is less than infinity. Again, we're looking for an answer based on demand, and D is supply. So, in this particular case, we've eliminated 3 answers, and we're back to C. But we're also able to go back to 25 and I guess infer that what the author's looking for here is, or is implying, that we have an elastic consumer, elastic demand, so that when we're deciding between C and D in question 25, it probably tells us that the best answer might be C, that it decreases by, D, that it decreases by less than the amount of the per unit tax, okay? Because we've got a consumer that is elastic. All right, let's go on to 27. Countries can expect to gain from international trade as long as. Now, what's the key word here? Well, to me, it's gain. Because under economic thought, international trade is a win-win situation under the concept of comparative advantage. And so what is the main thought there? Well, comparative advantage is that you specialize in the product that you are best at producing. So let's take a look at some of the answers. Keep production diversified. That runs totally contrary. Specialize according to their comparative advantage. Well, that certainly seems right. C, produce only those goods for which they have a relatively high opportunity cost. Well, that really doesn't seem relevant. D, use trade restrictions. Well, right then and there, I think I can eliminate that because economists under free trade do not believe in that. So I think we've eliminated 3 answers already and can go back to B. 28, technological changes in telecommunications have. What's the key word? I think technological. What does that do? It allows us to become more efficient. It allows us to actually become more competitive, and it becomes a situation where the labor cost becomes probably less relevant because we introduce robotics, automation, etc. So let's take a look at the answers. Reduce the importance of services in a world economy. Actually, it's probably allowed us to enhance it. Allowed increased foreign trade in more services. Well, that may be true, so let's not eliminate that. Reduce the need for foreign trade of many services. Well, that probably runs contrary to where we want to go. Profoundly affected trade in manufactured goods with little effect on trade and services. Well, technology has probably affected both the manufactured activity as well as trade services, okay? So I think we can eliminate that one as well and go back to the one that sounded good, B. 29. In the U.S., the outsourcing of service jobs, such as those in call centers, has become a political issue. How do economists typically view outsourcing? And I think the key word is economist, because we do know that we have an issue of outsourcing and there are political issues, but how would an economist look at it? Well, the economist isn't going to get into the political issues. They're looking at a win-win situation. How do you maximize profits? And India or whomever may be better able to provide call centers at a lower cost. And under the comparative advantage theory, they may think that's perfectly fine. So let's look at some of the answers. It helps both countries in the long run. Maybe. It hurts both countries because the youth loses jobs and the employees of the call centers are exploited. Well, economists are probably not going to think that that's a loss to both countries. It helps the U.S. but hurts the country with low-cost labor. Hardly, because the other country is going to benefit. It helps the country getting the jobs but hurts the U.S. Well, I think again in this case, the economist is going to consider this a win-win under comparative advantage, and therefore A is the right answer. Okay, last question, 30. When a U.S. company establishes a call center in India that answers its customer service calls, the U.S. is. And so the question is, what's the key word here? And to me, it's India, because if you use the word India, it implies that there's a lot of outsourcing going to India, and the biggest thing that's being established in India are call centers. So let's take a look at some of the answers here. Outsourcing, a form of importing services. Well, we know it's a form of outsourcing, so let's not eliminate that. Outsourcing, a form of exporting services. Let's keep that in the running. And C and D are insourcing. So I think that we can eliminate C and D because we're certainly not insourcing. We know we are outsourcing. So the question is, which is the best answer between A and B? Is it a form of importing services or exporting services? In this case, we're using people in India to answer the calls. So therefore, we're importing services, and therefore A is the right answer. Okay? I hope that this video has been a help to you. All I can tell you is believe in the methodology. It does work, and practice just enhances a skill that you can continue building on and getting better and better. Thank you.